This is a true account of the events that dismantled my life. Sequence of betrayals that I still feel in the marrow of my bones every time the wind whistles through the skyscrapers of Chicago. The first time I died was on a rainy Tuesday in the lobby of the Peninsula Hotel on Superior Street, watching my wife of 12 years, Alina, lean into the neck of a man who looked like everything I wasn't. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel. Tell us where you're from and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. I had been standing there for 20 minutes, hidden behind a decorative marble pillar, my hands trembling so violently I had to shove them into the pockets of my trench coat. I wasn't supposed to be there. I was supposed to be in a board meeting in the Loop, discussing architectural schematics for a new high-rise project. But a forgotten iPad and a synchronized Find My Device notification had led me to this opulent, gold-trimmed purgatory. The dot on the map hadn't moved for 3 hours. When I walked through those revolving doors, I prayed it was a mistake. I prayed she had just left her tablet in a cab or had a business lunch with a client I didn't know about. Then I saw her. Alina, my rock. The woman who had been by my side since we were broke students at Northwestern. She was wearing the black silk dress I bought her for our last anniversary, the one she told me was too special to wear to a regular dinner. She wasn't with a client. She was with Julian Vane, the managing partner of the law firm, where she worked as a senior paralegal. Was 20 years older, silver-haired, and possessed the kind of arrogance that only comes from owning half the zip codes in the Gold Coast. He whispered something into her ear, and she laughed. It wasn't the polite corporate laugh she used at office parties. It was a deep, visceral sound of genuine intimacy. He slid his hand down the small of her back, his fingers dipping below the waistline of that silk dress, and she didn't flinch. She leaned back into him, her eyes closing for a brief second in what looked like pure, unadulterated bliss. In that moment, the 12 years of our marriage, the mortgage we signed together, the dog we buried in the backyard, the 3 rounds of failed IVF that nearly broke us all of it turned to ash. I didn't confront them, not then. My father always told me that if you're going to hunt a predator, you don't start by screaming in the woods. You wait, you watch, you let them get comfortable in their lies. I turned around, walked out into the biting Chicago rain, and threw up in a trash can on the corner of Michigan Avenue. The drive back to our home in Winnetka was a blur of neon lights and crushing silence. When I got inside, the house felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed. I sat in the dark in my home office, staring at a framed photo of us on our honeymoon in Amalfi. We looked so young, so certain of each other. I realized then that the woman in that photo was a ghost. The woman currently in a hotel room with Julian Vane was a stranger wearing her skin. Alina came home 2 hours later. I heard her Audi pull into the driveway, the soft chime of the security system, the click of her heels on the hardwood. I stayed in the dark. "Mark," she called out, her voice light and melodic, betraying not a hint of guilt. "Why are the lights off? Did the power go out again?" She walked into the office, smelling of expensive gin and his cologne. She reached for the light switch, and the room flooded with a sterile white glow. She jumped when she saw me sitting there, still in my damp coat. "Jesus, Mark, you scared me. Why are you sitting in the dark?" "The meeting ended early," I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. "How was your day?" She didn't miss a beat. She set her designer bag on the desk, the bag I. Dee worked overtime to buy her for Christmas and sighed with practiced exhaustion. Ugh, miserable. Julian had us in depositions all afternoon. I thought my head was going to explode. I'm so exhausted I could sleep for a week. She walked over and kissed my cheek. It was a cold, transactional gesture. I felt a surge of revulsion so strong I had to grip the arms of my chair to keep from pushing her away. For the first time, I saw the mask. Yes. I saw the way her eyes darted to the side, the way she adjusted her hair to hide a faint mark on her collarbone. She was a professional. She had been doing this for a long time. "You look tired, honey," she said, stroking my hair.
"I'm going to take a shower."
"I'll make some tea." I watched her walk out of the room, her hips swaying with a confidence that felt like a slap in the face. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed next to her, listening to her rhythmic breathing, feeling the heat radiating from her body, and I felt like I was lying next to a ticking bomb. I realized that if I just divorced her now, she would take half of everything. The house, my retirement, the stocks. She would walk away with a windfall and move straight into Julian's penthouse on Lakeshore Drive. No, that wasn't going to happen. If she wanted to play a game of deception, I would be the grandmaster. The next morning, the transformation began. I went to a specialty electronics store in a gritty part of the city and bought things I never thought I... Do you need voice-activated recorders, a GPS tracker with a magnet mount, and keylogging software? I spent the next week living a double life. By day, I was the doting, oblivious husband. By night, I was a ghost in my own home, installing software on her laptop while she showered, hiding recorders in the crevices of her Audi, and tracking her movements on a burner phone I kept in my gym bag. The data started pouring in within 48 hours. The audio from her car was the worst. I sat in the parking lot of a Dunkin' Donuts on Wacker Drive, listening to the recordings through my earbuds. I heard them. I heard the way they talked about me. Does he suspect anything? Julian's voice was a low, gravelly rumble. Mark. Alina laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. Please. He's too busy looking at blueprints to notice the world is falling down around him. He's a good provider, Julian, but he's dull. He thinks our life is perfect because I tell him it is. And the divorce? You said you were waiting for the right time? I need another 6 months, Elena replied. Once the bonus structure at the firm hits and he finishes the Chicago Spire project, his net worth will peak. I've already talked to a friend in family law. If I play the neglected wife card right, I can take the Winnetka house and at least 40% of his firm's equity. Just be patient, darling. My heart didn't break this time. It hardened.
Oh.
It turned into a cold, dense stone in my chest. She wasn't just cheating. She was staying in the marriage like a parasite, waiting for the host to grow fat before she drained the blood. I spent the next month gathering every scrap of evidence. I followed them to a secluded beach house in Lake Geneva. I took high-resolution photos from a distance, images of them on the balcony, images of them sharing a bottle of wine I had bought for her. I tracked their texts, which were filled with graphic descriptions of their encounters and detailed plans on how to hide money from me. But the real mistake she made, the one that changed everything, happened on a Thursday. Alina was careless. She thought she was untouchable. She had started using a shared cloud folder for her work files, not realizing that I still had the administrative login for our home network. One afternoon, while I was supposedly at a site visit, I accessed the folder. I expected to find more photos or perhaps a secret bank account. What I found was far more explosive. Julian Vane wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal. Lena, in her role as his trusted senior paralegal, had been helping him facilitate a massive kickback scheme involving city construction contracts. They were laundering money through a series of shell companies, and Alina had been keeping a black ledger of the transactions, likely as insurance against Julian in case he ever tried to dump her. She had saved the ledger in a file disguised as 2023 garden renovation plans. I sat at my desk, scrolling through the spreadsheets, my eyes widening. There were names of city officials, dates, and amounts. Millions of dollars. And right there at the bottom of the payroll for a fake landscaping company was Elena's name. She wasn't just his mistress. She was his bagwoman. The leverage was total. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. I went to a man named Elias Thorne, divorce attorney, who specialized in high-net-worth cases and who had a reputation for being a legal piranha. We met in a dimly lit office in a pre-war building near the courthouse. I laid it all out for him, the affair, the recordings, the photos, and finally, the ledger. Elias leaned back in his leather chair, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. Mr. Sterling, most men come to me with a broken heart and a few grainy photos of a motel parking lot. You've brought me a nuclear warhead. I don't want a standard divorce, Elias, I said, my voice cold. I want her to have nothing. I want her reputation destroyed. I want her to look in the mirror and see the ruin she created. Given this ledger, Elias said, tapping the folder, we can do much more than that. Julian Vane is a powerful man, but the feds love powerful men who steal from the city. If we play this right, your wife will be looking at a choice. Cooperate and lose everything in the civil suit, or go to prison with her lover. Let's play it right then, I said. The next 3 weeks were a masterpiece of psychological warfare. I became the perfect husband. I brought her flowers. I booked a weekend trip to Napa Valley for her birthday. I told her I was thinking about putting her name on the deed to my firm/new satellite office. I watched her eyes light up with greed, watched her play the role of the loving wife, while she secretly texted Julian under the table. The arrogance of a cheater is their greatest weakness. They truly believe they are the smartest person in every room. The night of the big reveal wasn't in a courtroom. It was at the annual Chicago Bar Association Gala at the Drake Hotel. Julian Vane was being honored for his contributions to the legal community. It was a black tie affair, the room filled with the city's elite: judges, politicians, and high-profile lawyers. Alina looked stunning in a deep emerald gown. She walked through the ballroom on my arm, nodding to people, her smile radiant. Julian was across the room, holding court near the stage. They didn't even acknowledge each other, but I knew. I had heard their plan on the car recorder that morning. They were going to meet in the VIP lounge after the speeches to celebrate his award. As the dinner wound down, the master of ceremonies took the stage. And now, we have a special video presentation honoring the career of Julian Vane, prepared by his dedicated staff. The lights dimmed. A large screen descended from the ceiling. Alina squeezed my hand. "He deserves this," she whispered. "He's worked so hard." "He certainly has," I replied. The video started with the typical montage of Julian's legal victories and charitable work. But 3 minutes in, the audio began to glitch. The screen flickered to black. Then a new image appeared. It was a high-resolution photo of Julian and Alina on the balcony of the Lake Geneva house. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop on the thick carpet. Then, the audio from the car recorder started playing the clip of Alina calling me dull and explaining how she was going to harvest my assets before leaving me. The crowd gasped. I felt Alina's hand go cold in mine. She tried to pull away, but I gripped her wrist, leaning in close to her ear. "Don't move," I whispered. "The best part is coming." The video cut to the garden renovation plans. The spreadsheets began scrolling across the screen: the kickbacks, the shell companies, the city contracts. Julian's name and Alina's name were highlighted in bright neon red. The silence in the room turned into a low roar of whispers and shocked exclamations. Julian stood up, his face turning a ghostly shade of gray. He looked toward the tech booth, but the doors were locked from the outside. My pie had made sure of that. "Mark, what is this?" Lena hissed, her voice trembling. "Stop this." "Ah! This is a mistake." "The only mistake was yours, Elena," I said, standing up. "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You thought I was too busy with blueprints to notice. But you forgot that architects know how to look at the foundation. And yours was rotten." I reached into my tuxedo pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. I set it on the table in front of her. "Those are the divorce papers. We've already filed a lis pendens on all the accounts. By the way, the men in the back of the room aren't waiters. They're from the state's attorney's office." As if on cue, 4 men in suits approached the head table. The room exploded into chaos. Julian tried to bolt for the side exit, but he was intercepted. Lena sat frozen, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror as the cameras of the city's social photographers flashed incessantly, capturing her fall from grace in high definition. The fallout was swift and brutal. Julian Vane was indicted on multiple counts of wire fraud and public corruption. To save his own skin, he tried to pin everything on Alina, claiming she had masterminded the ledger. Alina, in turn, tried to flip on him. They tore each other apart in the press, their sordid affair becoming the lead story on every news outlet in Chicago for months. Because of the evidence of her criminal activity and the ironclad morality and criminal conduct clause Elias had found in our original prenuptial agreement, which she had forgotten even existed, the divorce was a slaughter. I kept the house in Winnetka. I kept my firm, kept the retirement accounts. Alina was left with nothing. Her reputation was radioactive. No law firm in the country would hire her. Her friends in the Gold Coast stopped answering her calls. Even her own parents, ashamed of the public scandal and the theft from the city, refused to take her in.
Ow.
The last time I saw her was 6 months later. I was leaving my office in the Loop, heading toward the parking garage. A woman was standing by the entrance looking disheveled, her expensive emerald gown replaced by a cheap, pilled sweater and worn jeans. It was Alina. She looked 10 years older. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a hollow, desperate look in her eyes. "Mark," she said, her voice cracking. Please, I have nowhere to go. I'm living in a studio in Cicero. I can't even pay the heating bill. Just give me something. A loan. Anything. I stopped and looked at her. For a second, a tiny flicker of the man I used to be felt a pang of pity. But then I remembered the sound of her laughter in the Peninsula lobby. I remembered the way she talked about harvesting me, told Julian I was dull. Alina, I said quietly, you said I wouldn't notice the world falling down around me. But you were wrong. I noticed everything. I just waited for the right moment to let it fall on you. I walked past her, the click of my shoes on the pavement the only sound in the cool evening air. I got into my car, the one she had helped me pay for with my own money, and drove away, not once looking in the rearview mirror. As I crossed the bridge over the Chicago River, the city lights reflecting off the dark water, I realized the house in Winnetka was still empty. And the silence in my life was louder than ever. I had one. I had destroyed her completely. I had my money, my firm, and my pride. But as I pulled into my driveway and looked at the dark windows of the home we once shared, I realized that revenge is a cold meal that leaves you feeling remarkably hungry. I sat in the car for a long time, watching the snow begin to fall, realizing that while I had broken her life into 1,000 pieces, I was still the one left picking up the glass. The end.